What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? I'm the Godless engineer, and I critically analyze apologist claims to give you the best arguments and information so that you can stand up and use your voice. Today's video is a clip from The Line. If you want to catch me on The Line, I'm on there once a month to host Skept Talk. The Line also has a number of other shows that you might be interested in. So after you watch this clip today, why don't you go on over there, subscribe, and be sure to catch the next show. So next up, we've got Steven from Florida again. I'm so sorry you're calling from Florida, but hi, Steven.
Hey, how's it going? Yeah,
pretty good. How you doing?
Florida, but I'm doing well. It's Florida, but it's getting to the cool part of the day, so it's not hellish right now.
Mm-hmm. So, all right. So, what do you want to talk about?
Well, I saw your post in the mythicists versus historicists group saying, basically challenging anybody who wants to defend the historicity of Jesus of Nazareth, and I figured I'd pick up on that.
Do it.
So, all right. So, in the first century, Palestine and in parts of Greece, we have all these figures who were miracle workers, right? They're not real miracle workers, but there are stories about them, like Pythagoras. Pythagoras was earlier, but Honi the circle maker, and Hanina Bendoza, and there's one more, Apollonius of Tyana, and we also have these failed messiahs like Anthronges the shepherd, Judas the Galilean, Theudas, the Samaritan prophet. So we got Jesus of Nazareth, who fits all these categories. He's an alleged miracle worker, and he's a failed messiah. And so it just seems to me that that Jesus fits as one of these figures that all existed.
Well, no,
everyone
hold on.
agrees
You say
existed.
that he's a well, hold on. You say that he's a failed Messiah. Could you? I mean, where exactly is it that he's a failed Messiah?
Well, he got crucified by the Romans. That's as much of a failure as you can get.
You're going to need to provide evidence that that's a failure. Do the Christians see that as a failure?
Well, no, but the Christians were able to adapt that failure and change the definition of what it counts to be a Messiah.
Can you establish? Hold on. Can you establish that the Jews thought that being crucified or that a suffering and dying Messiah would be a failure?
Well, the Jews saw the purpose of the Messiah as one who would reestablish the Davidic dynasty, to continue the throne of David, which had been discontinued centuries ago. Jesus did not do that, obviously, and also the Messiah was someone who was supposed to.
Where are you getting this from? Where are you getting this from? Where are you getting this particular set of?
From the Hebrew scriptures themselves, Isaiah, Jeremiah, all the scriptures that talk about who the Messiah is supposed to be.
Oh, okay. Well, the suffering servant in Isaiah 52 and 53 has the Messiah dying, like being killed. He suffers and he dies and then he resurrects, which is exactly what we find.
No evidence, but there's absolutely no evidence that the suffering servant of Isaiah 53 is a messianic figure. He's not called the Messiah.
There is.
Called a king.
There is. I mean, you're just simply wrong about this.
Like that.
Have you heard of rabbinical scholar Daniel Boyron? Have you heard about the rabbinical scholar? Have you heard of rabbinical scholar Daniel Boyron?
Name doesn't ring a bell.
That tracks. So Daniel Boyron wrote a book called The Jewish Gospels, the story of the Jewish Christ. And he starts out his section discussing this by saying it has, and I'm quoting from the book, it has been generally assumed by modern folks folks, that Jews have always given the passage a metaphorical meaning. This is Isaiah 52 to 53, understanding the suffering servant to refer to the people of Israel, and that it was the Christians who changed and distorted its meaning to make it refer to Jesus, which is what you started off by saying, is that the Christians sort of retconned Jesus's death so that it can make sense. So you basically espouse what he says that generally people assume now. But Daniel goes on to say, quite to the contrary, we now know that many Jewish authorities, maybe even most, until the nearly modern period, have read Isaiah 53 as being about the Messiah. Until the last few centuries, the allegorical reading was a minority position. He continues on in his book here to say that there are, moreover, traditions in the Babylonian Talmud, and thus attested from the 4th to 6th centuries AD, but very likely earlier because of what the Talmud is. The Talmud records Jewish sentiments from about 20 BCE all the way up to the 6th centuries, 6th century CE. Continuing, the most famous and explicit of which is the Sanhedrin 98b. This is amongst many different references in it, referring to the Messiah. The Talmud asks there openly what is his name, and various names are proffered by different rabbis, and after several different views, we find it saying, and the rabbis say the leper of the house of Rabbi is his name, for it says, behold, he has borne our disease and suffered our pains, and we thought him smitten, beaten by God and tortured. Isaiah 53:4. We see here both the vicarious suffering of the Messiah and the use of Isaiah 53 to anchor this idea. And he goes on in this particular section of his book to reinforce the fact that ever since the early days of Judaism, like 20 BCE onward, you have rabbinical teachers that are interpreting Isaiah 52 and 53, the suffering servant passages, as being about the Messiah. Not only do we have that, but we've also got the wisdom of Solomon, which was very important to the first century Christians and Jews. And it's very easy to see in chapters 2 and 5 that the righteous one, or this anointed one, the Christ, the Messiah, is to be shamed and is to be killed, and in a very shameful way, and is also to be resurrected into this sort of kingly position over everybody else. So we have multiple different lines of evidence that show a pre-Christian idea of a suffering and dying Messiah that's put to death in a shameful manner. Now, if you were in the first century, one of the ways that you could be shamefully put to death is being crucified. So it kind of makes it seem like that there's ample evidence in Jewish scripture in order to invent this idea of the Messiah suffering, dying by crucifixion, and then resurrecting in order to absolve our sins. So, I mean, there is evidence. You can't say that there's no evidence, because there's obviously evidence.
Okay, so you brought up a whole list of examples there, and I'd have to go through and look at them again. But I mean, do you think that it's the consensus position that scholars think that Isaiah 53 is pointing to a messianic figure? Because I mean, scholars such as Bart Ehrman, John J. Collins, and Peter Flint, they think that there's no evidence that Isaiah 53 is messianic at all.
Okay. So you've brought up 3 names, and here I am just going to totally destroy your list. So not only do we have rabbinical scholar Daniel Boyron who connects this, but we've also got Jason A. Staples, who had Dr. Ehrman as a dissertation advisor. Dr. Ehrman had to sign off on this one specific footnote in Jason Staples' dissertation. He says the oft-repeated dictum that there is no evidence for the concept of a suffering and dying anointed one, or messianic interpretation of the suffering servant in pre-Christian Judaism, is therefore mistaken. So now we've got 2. Boyron, we've got Jason A. Staples.
So you cited an
Boyron,
opinion.
hold on. I'm not done. It's a dissertation which has at least 4 academics that are reviewing it and passing it as being sound argumentation. So there's that. Now there's Staples, you got Boyron, and then you got Martin Hengel, who is also quoted by Daniel Boyron in this particular respect. Jason A. Staples lists William Brownlee from 1953, who was talking about A. DuPont Somner, who was speaking about the suffering servant connection. And on top of all that, Jason Staples also lists Louis Ginsburg's, the oldest interpretation of the suffering servant, John Goldingay's commentary on Daniel, and Portier Young's Apocalypse Against Empire. Not only do we have all of these, but we've also got Raphael Lataster, who has also put through peer review this particular argument about the suffering servant. Now, you've got all of these people right here, 9, and then you add on top of that all of these are peer-reviewed papers and books and everything like that. So the reviewers are going to multiply by at least 2, except for in the case of Jason Staples, who had probably about 4 academic reviewers pass his particular thing. So you're talking about over 24 people that are attesting to the fact that the suffering servant is considered the Messiah early in Judaism prior to Christianity.
Okay,
so
can I ask you a question?
your 3 scholars are impressive, bro.
Okay. Can I ask you something?
That's what this entire show is about.
Do you realize that one thing that mythicists and Christian fundamentalists have in common is they both want Isaiah 53 to point to the Messiah, to be a messianic passage, because Christian fundamentalists
you see you're adding a lot onto this by saying that we want anything to be true. You're putting a lot onto it saying that we want anything to be true.
But you do agree that Christian fundamentalists do want Isaiah 53 to be messianic. So
I think that what
Jesus
Christian fundamentalists want does not matter in this particular conversation. They think that a Jew resurrected from the dead, along with most. Hold on. Oh, and you know what? This is my show. I will mute you if you don't stop. Okay? Now, what I don't care what Christian fundamentalists want. I know what I want, and what I want is the truth. And when I look at the academia on this particular point, it points in the direction of the suffering servant being the Messiah, or at least being interpreted as the Messiah early in Judaism, which then influenced Christianity.
Okay, second question. How many of those scholars that you listed are Christian fundamentalists who want Isaiah 53 to be pointing to Jesus? Because I know at least one of them is Martin Hengel.
I'm sorry. Are you attacking the person instead of the argument? Is that your point on this question? Is to attack the person and not the argument?
No. I'm just pointing out.
Oh, it sounds like
the objective of these scholars is. Would you trust?
So that you're attacking. You're not attacking the arguments they're making. You're not attacking the arguments. You're attacking the person.
Fundamentalist scholars who want to prove the Exodus. I mean.
Well,
I want to know what their arguments are. I don't care who says it.
Right, exactly, Jim. Now, you know what's really weird is that hold on. What's really weird is this whole idea communicated in the Talmud, which is a Jewish book, a Jewish collection of books, and they develop a similar idea than Christians do. Or that Christians do, except the Jews, they have this idea of 2 messiahs. One is to suffer and die, just like the suffering servant in Isaiah 53, but also in other works as well. But they have a second Messiah that comes in and resurrects the first. So there's that particular theology. Now, one key thing about this is that nobody in the Talmud, no rabbis, seem to feel it necessary to mention how the Christians got things wrong. Like, they don't mention that they got things wrong about Jesus dying or Jesus at all. In fact, the only Jesus that's actually mentioned existed 100 years prior to when the Jesus of Christianity existed. And he was killed in a similar fashion, but in a totally different place for totally different reasons, using a totally different method of execution by totally different people.
How do you know it's the Jesus of Christianity when Jesus was a common name?
I didn't say. I said that it wasn't the Jesus of Christianity. I told you the reasons why it wasn't the Jesus of Christianity. I'm saying
Then
that the Talmudic I'm saying that the only Jesus that is in the Talmud that's mentioned by the rabbis of the Talmud existed 100 years prior to when the Jesus of Christianity is said to have existed and done all of his works and everything like that. So I'm saying that the Talmudic Jews, the rabbis, they had no idea about this Jesus person. Now, I'm not using this as like an argument from silence or anything. My point is that this tradition in the Talmud reaches far back enough to where they didn't have to worry about any other person trying to claim the messiahship and everything. They developed this whole idea of a dying Messiah prior to the Christians claiming that their Messiah had died.
Well, as I understand it, it's not the consensus of scholars that Isaiah 53 is pointing to a messianic figure. That's the opinion of some scholars, certainly, but I don't think that it has.
I mean, you gave me 3 scholars. I listed off over 24. Well, technically,
so
I listed off about 12. No. Well, I mean, you're hold on.
Yeah,
Who
can
you answer me?
Wait. Hold on, just real quick, both of you. So you said that the consensus of scholarship is John points out that he gave you more scholars than you did, and therefore the consensus is on his side. And now you're going to claim ad populum? Is consensus ad populum? And is John not actually making a consensus argument here? How do you get ad populum for that? Or is it just that you don't like the fact that John has more scholars on his side than yours?
Sorry, he was talking and I muted him, and I'm trying to unmute him, and it's not. Oh, there it goes. It's working. Okay, you're unmuted now.
Well, just because I haven't managed to collect as many scholars, that doesn't make a difference. I mean, if I had more time on my hands, I could comb through pages and pages of scholarly works and probably collect more.
Then how do you know how do you know that you're on the consensus side? How do you know you're on the consensus side? Do you have some evidence that the consensus of scholars is on your side?
Because I think that the scholars that I've mentioned are much more they're considered much more authoritative than the scholars that John's mentioned. Like,
so now we've
my
gone
scholars
from
are better than
authority.
Your scholars.
Yeah. So we've gone from consensus to authority here, right? You're dancing around the fact that you haven't studied much as John has, that you haven't read everything that John has, and so your arguments aren't going to be nearly as nuanced or as accurate as the ones that John's making. Are the 12 people that John actually listed off 9? And then each of those had at least 2 reviewers, and that's how we get to the number we got. And they all had to sign off on these for peer review. You cited 3 scholars. John's also mentioned that the view of Isaiah has changed over time, if I'm correct, John. Am I misstating that? That view has changed over time? So
yeah,
Ehrman could be absolutely correct in what he says, depending on the time period. So you haven't even established the time periods that John's talking about is what Ehrman is talking about, right? There are just holes in your argument that you need to go back and study before you can actually make them. And citing 3, even if one of them is Bart Ehrman, who I have a lot of respect for, I follow his stuff on YouTube. I think he's a great scholar, but I'm not going to say that anything he says is consensus without being in the mix. And as far as I know, there has been no survey of biblical scholars on anything they believe. And I think that there should be, so that someone like John and myself and you can actually know what consensus is. And you don't know what consensus is. John is making, and from a certain point of view, an argument by how many people he's got. But he's got more people all saying the same thing. And so right now what we have is consensus is on his side, not yours. And you can claim that
and just
popular if you want.
Just to make a little bit, give a little bit of nuance here. I don't think that the amount of scholars matters. I think that the evidence that is argued by the scholars is what matters. And I feel that the scholars that I have listed, all of them, bringing up the fact that we have rabbis that reach back to 20 BCE that are saying, hey, we are interpreting Isaiah 52 to 53 as being about the Messiah, and a plethora of other tangential facts about this point in time lead me in the direction of agreeing with these scholars. But I do not make the argument, oh, I've got more scholars than you. It was actually Stephen here who brought up, well, here's 3 scholars. And so I was just making the point that oh, nice, 3 scholars. Here's some more scholars for you if that's the route that you want to go. So that's my point that I was making.
Have you ever read John J. Collins'
consensus of scholars? There's no difference between saying there's consensus of scholars and ad populum. They're almost the exact same thing. When we say the consensus of scholars, we mean the number of scholars who agree with a particular proposition. It is an ad populum, and it is weak. And this is why you got to look at their arguments. But you can complain about you saying consensus and John pointing out that you don't have consensus with what you've already done. That makes no sense. Can't do it.
Can I ask something?
Sure.
Okay. In John J. Collins' book, The Star and the Scepter and the Star, he surveys all the scholars who have argued all of the arguments that Isaiah 53 points to messianic figure or messianic figures in the Dead Sea Scrolls that are supposedly dying messiahs or suffering messiahs, and he's shown why the majority of scholars is not convinced by each of these. And it's a survey of all of these arguments. Have you read that?
I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb and ask, have you read it?
Yes,
and I mean, okay. Well, what does he say about the Talmud referencing in Sanhedrin 98b? It directly referencing Isaiah 53 in reference to the Messiah.
I have to look that up. I don't have it right in front of me.
All right. Well, maybe you could look it up, and you can, whenever you call in again to have different arguments with me about this, then you can be a little bit better prepared about it. Because I mean, I get that there are scholars out there that disagree that the interpretation of Isaiah 52 and 53 being about the Messiah is a late development, but all of the scholars that I've listed here today recognize that the rabbinical scholars from 20 BCE onward, in not only in the Talmud but in other things as well, recognize that the Isaiah 52 and 53 is interpreted to be about the Messiah, and this is all pre-Christian too. So I mean, these are. You're going to have to come at me with a little bit more than, oh, this one scholar, said a thing. Like, I would expect some specific arguments if you're going to sway me in one direction or another. Like, you're going to need to tell me, why is it that this rabbinical scholar from, 200 CE or earlier mentions Isaiah 52 and 53 being about the Messiah? Why is that it's not a pre-Christian idea? Also, if you look, another point, if you're looking for actual evidence against your position, in Contra Celsum, Origen does not mention this whole idea that Isaiah 52 and 53 was originally considered to be about the Israel and not about the Messiah. You don't see him doing any kind of counter apologetics, countering that particular position, which seems to indicate that even early on you have this known idea that Isaiah 52 and 53 is about the suffering and dying Messiah.
He says, "Now I remember that, on one occasion, at a disputation held with certain Jews who were reckoned wise men, I quoted these prophecies, to which my Jewish opponent replied that these predictions bore reference to the whole people regarded as one individual and as being in a state of dispersion and suffering, in order that many proselytes might be gained, and on account of the dispersion of the Jews among numerous heathen nations." So he's
What is this?
not, this is contra celsum, that's the quote.
Well, you're just saying this is contra celsum, and then
So
you
the
said some
Jewish-
things. Where is it?
Contra celsum, book 1, chapter 55, where he talks about the Jewish opponents he was debating with, and they're arguing that the suffering servant is the whole nation, regarded as one individual. Do you want me to repeat the quote?
Let's see. Contra celsum.
Book 1, chapter 55.
Book 1, chapter 55. Now, what I was telling you earlier, just so that people are aware, is in rabbinical scholar Daniel Boyarin, the fact that I was bringing up, aside from one very important but absolutely unique point, notice in Origen's Contra Celsum, there is no evidence at all that any late ancient Jews read Isaiah 52 to 53 as referring to anyone but the Messiah. There are, on the other hand, several attestations of ancient rabbinic readings of this song as concerning the Messiah and his tribulation. So you're saying Contra Celsum, book
Origin
1,
is referring
chapter
to a conversation
55.
that he had Origin is referring to a conversation he had in 248 AD. Is that not late? That's pretty late, if you ask me.
I mean, I'm getting to it right now, so just hold your horses. See,
there is no mention that that these Jews he argued with were referring to a messianic figure.
okay, this is a good thing to chew on, and I will definitely look into it because this. I can't tell you right now like what kind of effect this will have on like Daniel Boyarin, his statement or anything. So I will definitely chew on this and look at it. It's a little hard for me to actually analyze something like on the phone and everything. So I will come better prepared next time that you talk to me.
All right.
But still, this is one reference.
98b then.
Definitely look at Sanhedrin 98b and all that. And we have been going for a long time, and I really do appreciate your call. Very nice, heated exchange about this topic. I really love it. So I appreciate you calling in.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Stephen. I'll talk to you hopefully again in the future.
All right. Talk to you later.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Whew, that was a good call. Now, Jim, I figure you're probably not on my side of the whole mythicism topic, but that's perfully fine. Contrary to popular belief,
I am.
Oh, you are?
I am. I'm just not as studied on it as you. By any stretch of the imagination. Because my argument is simply that all four gospels are about theology and not history. And so they promote theological points of view. And so you still need to demonstrate that this particular Jesus Christ actually existed, which of course we can't really do. We can't go back. So it doesn't matter to me if there was an actual guy or it's a group of guys, that were brought into all these tales, because the tales are about theology over history. And it's clear to me, like you've got the problem where the Last Supper in Matthew, Mark, and Luke is at Passover, and in John it's before Passover. Why? Why the discrepancy? And there's apologetics you can make about this. Don't get me wrong, but one, you can't read the Bible literally and take both those as true because they're contradictory. So you have to interpret. But John's message, my understanding of John, is that he is setting up Jesus to be the sacrificial lamb, and he has to be therefore sacrificed on Passover. Therefore, his Last Supper can't be on Passover. It has to be before Passover, because you can't have both at the same time. So you have a theological consideration being made, whereas if we were to look at the preponderance of the evidence of when the Last Supper was, it would be according to Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and not John. So why is that discrepancy there? Obviously, to me, it's theology as opposed to any type of history. They're just making that argument there. So I just haven't gotten as deep into it. I mean, Richard Carrier's book is still on my list. Lataster's book, I think it's Lataster's book, it's also on my list to read. Just that I'm a little bit more nuanced on the arguments. But to me, that's the whole argument, right? For me, right there is it's theology, not history. So if you're going to say it's history, you need to go a long way to make that case.
I mean, I think that
Mark and Matthew's got an exact copy of Mark in it, except it adds things to Mark, right?
Yeah, it does. And I think that's a pretty concise way to put it. Is that the story of Jesus is theology. Even in Paul's letters, Jesus is more theology than history, if any history at all. So. What's up, Heathen? Thank you so much for checking out this clip from The Line. If you enjoyed this clip today, you can get more of it by subscribing to The Line. So hit up those links in the description. So hit up those links in the description so you can catch me the next time I host Skept Talk. I don't know, was that 20 seconds? Here's some filler shit for, to fill out the 20 seconds. I don't know. Go fuck yourself, Jimmy.